My dear friends, over a lifetime spent observing markets and investors, I have learned a difficult truth that many prefer not to face. Most people do not suffer financially because they lack intelligence. They suffer because they misunderstand the nature of money and the role it plays in their emotional lives. In recent years, I have noticed that many people no longer speak about wealth in terms of stability, independence, or long-term security. Instead, they speak about a single number, repeated with unusual intensity: $5 million. They do not describe it as a carefully reasoned goal. They describe it as a moment of rescue. They say, often silently and with great conviction, "If I had $5 million, everything would finally be fine." This belief does not emerge from calm reflection. It emerges from pressure. I have seen this pattern many times before, in different decades and under different economic conditions. The language changes, the instruments change, but the psychology remains remarkably constant. The desire for a sudden large sum of money does not come from ambition. It comes from exhaustion. Exhaustion from waiting for progress that feels too slow. Exhaustion from uncertainty that never seems to end. Exhaustion from the sense that effort and reward are no longer clearly connected. When people feel this way for long enough, they stop asking sensible questions. They stop asking how wealth is built. They stop asking what risks are reasonable. Instead, they begin asking only one question: what will make this pressure stop? At that moment, the mind no longer seeks progress. It seeks relief. And when relief is unavailable through ordinary means, the imagination creates an illusion powerful enough to justify impatience. $5 million becomes that illusion, not because it is necessary for survival, but because it is imagined as the point where anxiety disappears, dignity is restored, and life finally feels under control. Here is where the confusion begins. Survival is mistaken for progress. If you have reached adulthood without $5 million, you have already demonstrated something important, even if you have never acknowledged it. You can survive without it. You may feel constrained. You may feel dissatisfied. You may feel that your potential has not been rewarded, but you are alive, functioning, and capable of rational judgment. So why does the mind suddenly insist that this number must be achieved immediately? Because prolonged pressure distorts perception. When a man is rested, he thinks in terms of reason and proportion. When a man is exhausted, he thinks only in terms of escape. At that point, impatience begins to masquerade as intelligence. People convince themselves that urgency is clarity, that speed is wisdom, that hesitation is weakness. This is not a financial transformation. It is a psychological one. And this is where many intelligent people quietly step onto a dangerous path. Not because they lack knowledge, but because they are tired of enduring uncertainty. This is the beginning of the $5 million illusion. Now we arrive at the quietest part of this lesson, and often the most difficult. Because by this point, many people realize that the number they have been chasing is not the true source of their discomfort. $5 million was never the problem, and it was never the solution. It was a symbol of rest, a symbol of relief, a symbol of permission to finally slow down. But here's the truth that many resist for years. No amount of money gives you permission to think calmly. That permission must be taken, not granted. I have watched markets reward patience and punish urgency with remarkable consistency. not because patience is clever, but because it aligns with reality. Reality moves slowly. Value is revealed gradually. Compounding does not rush. Human impatience, however, demands immediate confirmation. And when it does not receive it, it invents narratives to justify speed. This is why the illusion is so persuasive. It promises that calm lies just beyond the next achievement, that discipline can wait, that structure can be postponed. But postponing calm is one of the most expensive decisions an investor can make, because a restless mind cannot evaluate value honestly. It sees only movement. It mistakes activity for progress. I have never believed that markets are difficult because they are complex. They are difficult because they require emotional restraint. The greatest enemy of the investor is not ignorance. It is the inability to remain steady while others are emotional. The $5 million illusion teaches the opposite lesson. It teaches that speed is safety, that urgency is intelligence, that waiting is failure. And once these beliefs take hold, even sound opportunities are misused. People enter them too early. They size them too aggressively. They exit them too emotionally. In this way, opportunity itself becomes dangerous. True investing is not an act of conquest. It is an act of endurance. It requires the ability to sit quietly while others search for excitement, to do nothing while others feel compelled to act, to wait while others chase confirmation. This ability does not come from wealth. It comes from temperament. Temperament is built through repeated exposure to uncertainty without panic. It is built by choosing structure over relief, process over fantasy, preparation over speed. This is why I have always emphasized margin of safety, not merely as a financial concept, but as a psychological one. Margin of safety allows you to remain calm when outcomes are uncertain. It gives you room to be wrong without being ruined. It protects not only your capital, but your judgment. Without it, every decision feels decisive. Every fluctuation feels personal. Every delay feels threatening. And in that state, the mind cannot function rationally. So let me ask you a final question, and I encourage you to consider it slowly. What do you believe $5 million would finally allow you to do? Would it allow you to rest, to feel secure, to stop comparing yourself to others, to release the pressure you have been carrying? If so, then the work before you is not primarily financial. It is psychological, because the investor who learns to think calmly with little will think calmly with much. And the investor who cannot think calmly with little will not think calmly with much. This is not a criticism. It is an observation. Markets do not reward emotional relief. They reward emotional discipline. The illusion lies in believing that discipline comes after success. In reality, discipline must come first. Only then can wealth perform its proper function. Only then can money become a tool instead of a promise. And only then does the pursuit of wealth cease to feel like an emergency and begin to feel like a process. If there is one lesson I would leave you with, it is this. Do not chase numbers in order to escape pressure. Build structure so that pressure loses its power over you. Calm thinking is not the result of wealth. It is the foundation of it. Think carefully. Move deliberately. And remember that the market is patient. Those who learn to be patient with it are eventually rewarded. At this point, it is necessary to confront one of the most persistent misunderstandings about wealth. Many people believe that money itself creates peace. They assume that once a sufficiently large number is reached, anxiety will dissolve on its own. This belief is understandable, but it is incorrect. Money does not remove psychological pressure. It merely exposes how a person has learned to respond to pressure. I have observed individuals with modest means who slept peacefully at night and individuals of great wealth who lived in constant unease. The difference was never the size of their accounts, it was the structure of their thinking. A mind trained in urgency does not become calm when wealth arrives. It simply transfers urgency to a higher level. The fear does not disappear, it becomes more sophisticated. Instead of fearing poverty, the individual fears loss. Instead of fearing instability, he fears decline. Instead of fearing survival, he fears status. In this way, psychological poverty can survive even immense financial success. This is why I say that poverty is not stored in a bank account. It is stored in the nervous system. When a person has spent years feeling pressured, rushed, and uncertain, the body learns to live in a state of alert. Even when circumstances improve, the internal alarm continues to sound. Until this condition is addressed, no amount of money will feel sufficient. True wealth serves a quiet and specific function. It reduces unnecessary pressure. It expands time horizons. It allows rational judgment to replace emotional reaction. But wealth pursued as an escape from discomfort fails to perform this function. Instead of producing calm, it produces vigilance. Instead of producing clarity, it produces fear of reversal. This is why speed has never impressed me as an investment virtue. Speed demands continuous success. Calm allows for survival through error. Markets are not defeated by those who make occasional mistakes. They defeat those who cannot endure uncertainty. A man who feels rushed will always believe that the next decision is critical. A man who feels secure can afford to wait. And waiting in investing is often the most intelligent action available. When wealth is treated as an emergency, discipline collapses. When wealth is treated as a process, discipline strengthens. This distinction is subtle, but it is decisive. The $5 million illusion convinces people that relief lies ahead rather than within their control. It teaches them to postpone calm instead of practicing it. But calm is not a reward. It is a prerequisite. Without emotional discipline, wealth amplifies weakness. With emotional discipline, even modest resources can grow steadily. This is not a moral judgment. It is an observation drawn from decades of watching human behavior repeat itself. Until the internal pressure is reduced, external success will remain fragile. And this is why the true work of the investor begins not with numbers, but with temperament. Once this illusion takes root, it does not remain a harmless thought sitting quietly in the background. It begins to influence behavior, first subtly, then decisively. People rarely say to themselves, "I am about to abandon discipline." Instead, they use far more reasonable language. They say, "I cannot afford to wait. I need to move faster. I understand the risks, but time is against me." Impatience almost always disguises itself as realism, as awareness, as intelligence. I have heard highly intelligent investors explain reckless decisions with remarkable confidence. They spoke clearly, they sounded rational, but beneath their words was not insight, it was pressure. Pressure changes how the mind evaluates danger. When emotional pressure rises, caution begins to feel outdated. Patience feels naive. And discipline is reframed as something suitable only for those who are already wealthy. This is the moment when judgment begins to weaken, not dramatically, but quietly. In my work, I often described a character I called Mr. Market. Many misunderstand him as an external force, but Mr. Market lives inside the investor as much as he exists outside. Mr. Market is emotional. He is reactive. He changes his mood constantly. When you are calm, he offers opportunities. When you are impatient, he offers urgency. The $5 million illusion gives Mr. Market his greatest advantage. He begins to speak more loudly, more insistently. He whispers that others are moving faster than you, that opportunities are disappearing, that delay is equivalent to failure. And under this constant psychological noise, standards quietly erode. Margin of safety starts to feel excessive, speculation begins to look reasonable, and hope slowly replaces analysis. People convince themselves that they are acting boldly, when in reality they are reacting emotionally. This is how impatience transforms from a feeling into a strategy. But impatience is not a strategy. It is a symptom of emotional fatigue. Fatigue narrows perspective. It shortens time horizons. It makes the future feel immediate and threatening rather than distant and manageable. As this happens, risk is no longer evaluated calmly. It is justified emotionally. Decisions are no longer examined. They are defended. This is why intelligent people are often shocked by their own failures. They did not suddenly become careless. They became tired of enduring uncertainty. At this stage, wealth is no longer viewed as something to be built patiently. It is viewed as something that must arrive quickly. And once wealth is treated as an emergency, rational thinking cannot survive. The investor stops asking, "Is this sound?" He begins asking, "Will this end my discomfort?" This is not a failure of intelligence, it is a failure of emotional endurance. And unless this internal pressure is recognized and addressed, no amount of market knowledge will protect the investor from himself,